Renseignement personnel et de l'éthique de la Chambre.
Welcome to the meeting number 61.
Pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022, and therefore members can attend in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Should any difficult and technical challenges arise, please advise me. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, December 7th, 2022, the committee is commencing its study of the foreign interference and threats to the integrity of democratic institutions, intellectual property, and the Canadian state. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I am informing the committee that all witnesses, tous les témoins ont complété.
All witnesses have completed the required connection tests.
Following witnesses have not completed the required tests. Sorry, they've all been tested. Everybody is perfect, okay? So I'd now like to welcome our witnesses for the first hour. As an individual, Gabrielle Lim, doctoral fellow, Citizen Lab at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, University of Toronto, who is with us today on Zoom. From the Toronto Association for Democracy in China, Chuck Kwan, who's the co-chair. Welcome, Mr. Kwan. And from the Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project, Mehmet Toti, who's the executive director. Welcome, sir, this morning. Ms. Lim, we're going to start with you. You have up to 5 minutes for your opening statement. Please start.
Good morning. I'm Gabrielle Lim, doctoral fellow at Citizen Lab. I'm also a researcher at the Harvard Shorenstein Center. My research focuses primarily on information technology, civil liberties, and security, with a specialization in mis and disinformation. While the views I present are my own, they are based on research carried out by myself and my colleagues. The following comments will briefly cover some of the effects of foreign interference, the contributing factors that give rise to their effectiveness, and recommendations. So firstly, I want to stress that evidence of activity is not evidence of impact. For example, although it has been suggested that the Russian-based Internet Research Agency influenced public opinion, there's little evidence of direct impact on the US 2016 presidential election. The bulk of their activity was actually engaged in audience building. When compared to the volumes of media consumed by the average American across mainstream, independent, and social media, Russian-sponsored activities were but a small fraction. As such, we should avoid exaggeration when discussing such activities. To do otherwise risks undermining trust in our elections and sowing division amongst ourselves, including potentially alienating certain communities and increasing xenophobia. Secondly, I would like to draw attention to a different kind of foreign interference, digital transnational repression, which are foreign-directed digital operations that target individuals in Canada's diaspora communities. So this is happening on our land. This could include online stalking, harassment, threats, often gender-based attacks, hacking attempts, and other forms of intimidation. They may start off digitally, but often cross over into the real world. Even though transnational digital repression remains understudied, there's very strong evidence of its negative impact. My colleagues at Citizen Lab have documented its effects on mental health, self-censorship, fear of political participation. I highlight transnational repression because while it is a form of foreign interference, it shouldn't be equated with, say, online influence ops that seek to sway large audiences or some of the direct influencing of political parties that's being alleged. It's a very different beast, and I just want to stress that. Thirdly, I'd like to address some of the risk factors that make individuals susceptible to, say, foreign operated misinformation or foreign influence operations. Online influence operations can be thought of an issue of supply and demand. From the supply side, you have the foreign actors producing, distributing content targeted at Canadians, but we can also conceptualize influence ops as a result of a demand where certain communities or individuals might be predisposed to receiving and believing false or misleading information. This might stem from long-standing grievances, discrimination, or other forms of marginalization and inequality. Mitigations against potentially harmful influence operations then require addressing these grievances and inequities amongst Canadians, because as long as these social cleavages are left to fester, adversaries will be motivated to exploit them. As an example, the Nazis exploited racism in the US as part of the propaganda during World War II, and the same divisions were exploited again by the Russians in an attempt to further divide Americans in 2016. Lastly, I just want to say exercise great caution if you're considering any legislation. Some of my colleagues and I have documented over 60 countries that have enacted laws regarding misinformation or foreign online operations, and truly there's no good evidence that they're effective. Instead, they tend to face mounting criticism by activists and rights groups that they have the effect of silencing dissent and critical voices. If Canada also tightened control over the internet, this would legitimize a liberal and authoritarian-leaning government's own censorship-enabling laws. Introducing information controls through legislation also risks playing to Russia's and China's desire that information security, the control of information available to their publics, is a legitimate practice in both democratic and non-democratic states alike. The ceding of democratic rights to speak and access information to state monitors is antithetical to an open internet and the democratic norms Canada has staked its reputation on. Moreover, such information controls will likely do little to stop foreign interference. So I would advise exploring alternative policies, such as finding ways to build trust in our institutions and media, better connecting with diaspora communities, supporting targeted individuals, and exploring ways to address the for-profit models that drive our media ecosystem. Should legislative mechanisms be considered, we should be aware of how this might affect already victimized or targeted individuals and communities. In conclusion, while we should not dismiss the potential effects foreign interference has on our democratic processes, we should not exaggerate their impact and discern between the different types of interference and their effects. Our response should reflect sound analysis and evidence. To do otherwise would risk imposing ineffective information controls, lending legitimacy to liberal states to engage in censorship and surveillance, while simultaneously failing to build resiliency and trust in our government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lim. I know 5 minutes is a short time. You really packed it in there. So thank you for that. Mr. Kwan, who's the co-chair of the Toronto Association for Democracy in China. Sir, you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. The Toronto Association for Democracy in China was founded on the eve of the Tiananmen Square massacre on June 4th, 1989. Our organization supports democracy and advocates for human rights in China. As well, in recent years, we have been a watchdog for Chinese interference on Canadian soil. The first foray by China to exert soft power on Canadian society occurred in the early 90s when China was eager to polish its international image post-Tiananmen Square. Urged on and supported by Chinese consulates, organizations were set up by individuals sympathetic to the regime. Chief among them are the National Congress of Chinese Canadians, NCCC, and its successor, the Confederation of Toronto Chinese Canadian Organizations, CTCCO. These and many other proxy organizations practice the art of astroturfing, echoing the party line to defend China's foreign and domestic policies. In addition to engaging friendly academics and business people to advocate on its behalf, China also spreads its tentacles to cultivate elected officials and infiltrate political institutions at all levels of the Canadian society. All this is documented in journalist Jonathan Manthrop's book, The Claws of the Panda. One of these instruments of interference is the United Front Work Department. According to official documents, United Front takes special interest in people of Chinese descent living abroad, viewing them as powerful external threats as well as potential allies. It also employs thousands of agents to pursue the Chinese Communist Party's political strategy to use international networks to advance its global interests. They also harass and intimidate Canadians who are critical of China, activists, dissidents, and human rights defenders, rendering the Chinese Canadian community the real victims of this game. We are therefore not surprised by the finding of the recent CSIS report. No doubt, the interference in Canadian electoral process is a grave concern. But I argue that this is but the tip of the iceberg. China's interference in Canada has been soft, intangible, and gradual. As a result, this built up over the years, the 90% of the iceberg, if you were, remains invisible to many Canadians. Irrespective of whether the past elections have been fair or not, I argue this invisible part of the iceberg should be the focus of our concern. In 2017, Canadian Coalition on Human Rights in China, together with Amnesty International, gathered evidences of harassment and intimidation by the Chinese government on individuals in Canada working on China-related human rights concerns, and published the Harassment and Intimidation Report. The report also urged the government to set up a national hotline to allow for reporting of these harassment and intimidation incidents that are otherwise ignored by the local police or the RCMP. We therefore urge Canada to address China interference on these multiple fronts by taking a strong and principled stance in the issues highlighted in the CSIS reporting, establishing a national reporting hotline on harassment and intimidation, and set up a foreign agent registry similar to the one in Australia. While these actions may not completely eliminate the problem, at least they can act as deterrent and serve notice to foreign powers that and their proxies that we guard our democratic institutions and our sovereignty seriously. And at this time, I would like to add a few lines about that is not in my prepared statement. I just watched the live press conference carried out by Minister Menachino, in which the establishment of a foreign agent registry is seen as an attack on the Chinese-Canadian community. Let me assure you, this is not the case. The Chinese-Canadian community, together with our Uyghur community, Tibetan community, and other people, welcome this foreign agent registry. A registry on a foreign agent is not the same as a registry on all Chinese Canadians, and I welcome your further questions on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. Mr. Toti, you have 5 minutes to address the committee, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone, and thanks for this invitation. My name is Mehmet Tohti, a lifelong activist I call myself, and I currently working as Executive Director of Ottawa-based Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project. As a leading voice of Uyghur Canadians, we do research, documentation, and advocacy work to promote the rights of Uyghurs and other Turkic people in East Turkestan who are facing ongoing genocide and a crime against humanity by the government of China. One quick note, we are Uyghur Canadians. We are not a member of Chinese diaspora. It is precisely the reason that we refuse to become a Chinese and to assimilate in the Chinese culture by stubbornly preserving our ethnic, religious, and linguistic identities. We are subjected to ongoing genocide in China. And similarly, in that regard, Tibetans and the Mongols are also not identifying themselves as a Chinese Canadians or a member of Chinese diaspora. The topic of Chinese state interference is not a novelty for us. For decades, Uyghur Canadians have been subjected to all forms of intimidation and harassment by the Chinese Communist Party. Since my exile life more than 33 years, I personally experienced all forms of Chinese interference on my personal life, including the total isolation from my family members and siblings in East Turkestan, constant threat, intimidation, and harassment. It was in December 2003 when Chinese Ministry of Public Security announced the first batch of so-called terrorist organization list. An organization that I was chaired at that time, which is called World Uyghur Youth Congress, registered in Germany, was included in that terror list. And because of that misinformation and attack against us, I personally banned or cannot travel to many states like Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, or Central Asian states and Middle Eastern countries. Since 32 years since I left my homeland, I have been unable to visit my relatives. They cannot come to visit me in Canada. No one of my family members issued visa That's why I called it total isolation. Exactly 17 years ago, I engaged in the case of Uyghur Canadians, Hussein Jalal, who was kidnapped in Uzbekistan and sentenced to life in prison in China. I start noticing suspicious activities around me after my campaign. Here's one passage. I would like to give you a comparison, what we are talking today and what was the topic in 16 years ago. It was covered by Maclean magazine by Charlie Gills on May 14, 2007. The official, who identified himself only as a member of Chinese infamous Overseas Affairs Commission, had a laundry list of instructions. Mr. Tohti was to cease efforts to draw sympathy in Canada to the Uyghurs, the oppressed, largely Muslim population that has become a thorn in Beijing's side. He was a top spreading allegations of cultural genocide against People's Republic. Most importantly, he was not to attend an upcoming conference in Germany where Uyghur groups from around the world planned to form an international congress. We have your mother here and your brother too, he added cryptically, noting that police had driven the pair some 260 kilometers to regional police headquarters in Kashgar to help deliver Beijing's message. We can do whatever we want. The headline of the article was, "Beijing is always watching." Indeed, in 3 years since that night, the 43-year-old Tohti has had enough brushes with Chinese long-armed security apparatus to conclude Beijing's agents are still doing much at the police, not just in China, but here in Canada. I will refer you for later read. So in July 2020, right before in the parliamentary committee, before I'm testifying, I received a message, Twitter message, and it said, "Your mother is dead," and someone from Kunming City, nearly 4,000 kilometers from where my mother lived, just to stop me from testifying in the parliamentary committee. And another recent example, let me give you. In January 2016, less than 2 months ago, I received a phone call again from Chinese state police, from Urumqi, by taking hostage of my uncle, my mother's brother. And I was told that my 2 sisters are dead, and so was my mother. Whereabouts of my 3 brothers and their spouses and the children unknown. It was 15 days prior to vote on M62 in our house for the resettlement of 10,000 Uyghur refugees. That is the campaign I started since 2017. So Beijing is watching every day with the threat and intimidation and harassment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tohti. Really appreciate your words and the opening statements of all of our witnesses today. I know our committee members are going to have lots of questions. I hate the committee process because of the timelines, but we do have 6 minutes in the first round, and I'm going to have to stick to that because we do have another full panel after our first round is complete. We're going to start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lim, Mr. Tohti, Mr. Kwan, for joining us today. I note that doing so is not without personal risk, and that it's never easy for one to appear in front of a parliamentary committee, and particularly with the situation that you've just outlined, Mr. Tohti. It's the gravity of this is not lost on us. My first question is for you, Mr. Tohti. What does the communist regime in Beijing do to the Uyghur people in Canada, and why do they do that?
The communist regime in Beijing is not democratically elected regime. That regime is not accountable for its people. It acts like a criminal organization. For that regime, it is important to keep the Uyghurs and other people under their control, and for that reason, they take a hostage of our family members. I'm speaking on behalf of Uyghur Canadians, and just to control our life here in Canada. And even the democratic and free country in Canada we are living, and Uyghur Canadians are not free just because of the Chinese pressure and the Chinese threat by taking hostage of their family members. Basically, they don't want the Uyghur Canadians to exercise their right to protest and exercise their right to speak about the atrocity crimes that Chinese Communist Party is committing. And that is the biggest threat for the Chinese government, and for that reason, it is regarded, these kind of peaceful activities, as part of national security, and for that reason, they apply all harsh measures to crack down.
Thank you. Mr. Kwan, you talked about, you have talked about some of the coercion that Beijing uses. Can you share some of the examples or an example of how the communist regime in Beijing attempts to coerce and intimidate Chinese Canadians?
I can share with you many, many incidents, but I believe just to illustrate the kind of strong arm of the law, if you were, of the Chinese here in Canada, and the kind of subtle way that they can do this with sort of exerting fear on the Chinese Canadian community is a very typical example of you get a phone call, not only just in the middle of the night, but you get a phone call in the middle of the day asking, so how are your parents doing back in Sichuan, China? And then you'll get the message. That means if you don't behave, your parents' phone numbers, address, or even their physical well-being is under threat. So in that sense, it's a very subtle threat, and they've used this on many, many Chinese Canadians. I'm sure they have done this to Mr. Toti as well. So this is something that I can vouch for. I will tell you a very innocuous kind of way that they did to me. I was traveling to Hong Kong for a cultural event. I'm a filmmaker. I went to a film festival in Hong Kong to present my film, and I was followed in Hong Kong back in 2005. And I was questioned during the Q&A period by what I seemed to be an agent of the Chinese Communist regime. And these are little things that they know. You know that I know that you know that I'm watching you. So that's the kind of thing that they exert pressure on you.
Thank you. You have talked about observations that you suspected, or you've spoken to media about suspected interference by the regime in Beijing in the electoral process in Canada, specifically federal nominations. I believe in one instance you were talking about busloads of people who had been sent to a nomination as arranged by agents of Beijing operating in Canada. With about a minute, if you could tell us about that.
Standard modus operandi. Chinese consulate may not do it directly. They have their proxies as a wink-wink thing. They have business people arranging for buses and paying stipends, something like $20 or $50 a day, to bus in people either to nomination meetings or to do counter-protesting. And we have seen this in one of the fights at the Toronto District School Board, where they bus in international students from Waterloo, from Guelph, into Toronto to do this kind of thing. And this is something that I've seen firsthand, and this is something that I've been told firsthand by many other writings as well.
I think that's my time. We'll come back to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Fergus, you're next for 6 minutes.
Je pose mes questions en français.
I'll speak in English for my guests.
First of all, thank you very much for your testimony. Both Mr. Toti, Mr. Kwan, as well as our guest from the Monk School. I think I'm going to start with you, Mr. Kwan, if I could. You talked about how the United Front Workers Party, UFWD, have come together to engage in astroturfing. Could you give me an example? Can you give us an example of a recent example, if you could, of astroturfing?
The astroturfing during the head tax redress fight, in which Chinese Canadian community asked the government to pay reparation and apologize for the Chinese Exclusion Act and its head tax. This was a campaign that was carried out by over 20 years before that by people in the Chinese Canadian community. And I represented one of the organizations, the main organization at that time, to lead on this fight. But as I mentioned, right after the Tiananmen Square, Chinese set up an umbrella organization called the NCCC, National Congress of Chinese Canadians. They usurped the issue by themselves, in which they have no connection to. These are recent Chinese immigrants that have nothing to do with Chinese Exclusion Act. And yet they took the topic up. They issued press releases. They formed over 300 proxy organizations registered with Corporate Canada, in which they share directors and have one perhaps share the same postal addresses and so forth. So these are what is examples of astroturfing. They set up these fake organizations, issue press releases, and have press conferences.
So I'm glad that you keep track of, and your organization keeps track of examples of foreign interference. Is it? I don't need you to get into detail about it today, but would you feel comfortable with providing the committee with examples of these organizations that you feel are acting?
It would be my pleasure to do that.
That would be great. And when you track those organizations, you also track the members of the boards of directors of these organizations with the leadership of.
Yes.
Would you be comfortable sharing that with us as well?
It's been so long. I certainly will try my best. Yeah.
Okay. So that's an interesting question. Are there recent examples that your organization tracks?
Not our organization, but certainly I can get to the information if you would like.
That would be very helpful.
These are basically public records. One of the things I want to talk about is I speak the language, I live the culture, and I understand the modus operandi of these both the Chinese Communist Party as well as many of its proxies. So we are in a sense on the ground, and we pretty much know who's who. I mean, if you want to say who are the 11 potential nominees that the CSIS had kind of mentioned, I could pretty much guess who they are. Yeah. So it's an open secret that both Mr. Toti and I have been living with and knowing, who's who. And that's why, after so many years, it's no longer a surprise to us that the recent CSIS report has come out with this explosive intelligence, if you will.
It was mentioned in various testimonies, and I think this question will go to our guest from the Monk School, of the Australian model of the foreign agent registry. Would you happen to have you done research on this and as to its effectiveness and what are the things that we should be adapting to a Canadian context and what things we shouldn't be adapting to a Canadian context?
Yeah, for sure. So I haven't researched specifically the Australian foreign agents registry. My sense, though, is Canada could set one up. How effective it will be, it's because a lot of these operations are covert or clandestine by nature, right? And so even if you were to put agents and register everyone, my sense is they will find alternate means to evade or circumvent the registry. There's also no strong evidence one way or another that labeling someone a foreign agent or an entity might change an audience's mind. So for example, YouTube, they have a labeling procedure. They label anything that comes from, say, Russian state agency, Chinese any state agency, right? But the effects are mixed. People still watch these videos. They still comment on these videos. They still consume these videos. So whether or not that actually deters people from watching it or believing it, to be honest, the research is still out. However, I think Mr. Kwan mentioned something earlier that I think would be worth exploring, and that's having a dedicated hotline or a rapid response hotline for individuals or communities that really need to seek either security. So this could be helping them with their devices if they're being harassed online or offline, both usually happen at the same time. We could also explore having an independent agency that's separate from, say, law enforcement or CBSA or CSIS to address specifically transnational repression. I think that would be really helpful in supporting victims and targeted communities.
Okay,
So I think there are other methods.
Thank you, Ms. Lim. We may get to
leave it at
those in a
that.
sec.
Okay.
Just before we go to Mr. Villamure, I want to ensure, Mr. Kwan, that you have your interpretation device available. And Ms. Lim, make sure you're on the interpretation, the proper interpretation. Monsieur Villamure, je peux commencer le temps.
I haven't started the time yet, but I will now, and you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kwan, I'll start with you. I would like to start by thanking you for being here today. Do you believe that the Canadian government is abandoning the Chinese diaspora?
I would say abandoning is a very strong word. I would say ignore. It is a better word to describe the kind of thing. For many years, we've been shouting the same messages. Even back in 2006, when I presented to this committee, we basically said China controls everything. They know everything. Even if you change your cell phone, they can quickly find you from Beijing, from Toronto. So it is something that I believe that the government should take a stronger message and also take a stronger stance. And I agree with many of the critics about the registry saying that it may not be 100% effective. Certainly, we understand that. But we think that as long as we're not ignored, as long as the government has been seen as actively trying to protect the integrity of its election as well as its community, then it will send a strong message back to hostile countries, forces like China, Russia, or Iran, saying that we are watching over our citizens as well. So don't ever try to, exert pressure or harass or intimidate any of our Canadians.
Donc, selon votre opinion.
So, in your view, this message is currently not being sent by the Canadian government.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Certainement.
Certainly. So, in your view, that message that Canada will protect citizens is not being sent to the Chinese government.
Right. I strongly believe that. I think more external, more explicit kind of public display is worth it. Right now, as you know, we are under the COVID and as well, people are looking at the racism of Chinese Canadians. And this line of setting up a registry is an attack on the Chinese Canadian community, I will not buy. This is a standard line given by the Chinese Communist Party. They're using the same line for everything, for COVID, for anything else. So I hope that the government will not buy into the fact that just because you're setting up a foreign agent registry, you're setting up a registry for all Chinese Canadians.
La distinction est fondamentale.
The distinction is essential. Can you tell us about the Chinese police stations that we've heard about in the media?
Yes. This is something that has been exposed by a Spanish non-governmental organization, and we have not known about it before. However, once it has been pointed out to us who runs these stations and who's behind, who are the civil organizations behind these police stations, we were not surprised because these are well-known names. I wanted to point out to you, Monsieur, in Brossard and in Montreal, Journal de Montréal recently, just yesterday, had an article about 2 police stations in Brossard and in Montreal. And that was run by the same woman who is a city councilor of Brossard. So, and she openly advertised herself as being a partner of the Chinese Communist Party. So this is the thing that, you know, first of all, we're not surprised that this actually happens.
Est-ce que vous croyez que c'est...
Do you believe that these tactics were used elsewhere in the world, or is this new here in Canada, or have these tactics been used elsewhere?
These tactics have been used in many, many other countries. I believe they have identified 100 stations around the world, of which Canada has, I believe we have 5 or 6. 3 in Toronto, now 2 in Montreal, and 1 in Vancouver.
Le gouvernement du Canada...
So the information services in Canada should not be surprised because such police stations exist elsewhere in the world, correct?
Right. This was the report was issued by Safeguard Defenders. It's a Spanish organization. I know that China has very, very similar, in fact, more severe operation in Australia, in Spain, in many other European countries, and of course other non-European countries as well.
Vous avez mentionné un peu plus tôt...
Earlier, you mentioned that you know the names of the ridings of parliamentarians that were impacted and that it was common knowledge. Would you be able to identify the regions or the ridings?
I can share with you 2 highly suspected cases of electoral influencing. The Kenny Chew's riding, the conservative MP who lost his seat because he was the one who had a private member's bill on the foreign agent registry. And of course, the second riding that we are very highly suspicious of is Bob Soroya in Markham. He's been winning by 15,000 votes every other election, but this election, a Chinese aligned candidate from the other party has taken over by at least 7,000.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. Merci, Monsieur Villemur.
Thank you, Mr. Villemur.
Green, you're up next for 6 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses who've made it here today. You know, I think it was important for this committee in embarking on this that we took the opportunity to cover topics that haven't previously been explored at other committees so as not to duplicate the work. And I think that starting in this way, particularly as it relates to material impacts for people that are here, is an important part of the process, and I'm glad that we're able to embark on it. Ms. Lim, in an article titled "The Risks of Exaggerating Foreign Influence Operations and Disinformation," you stated that our fears and concerns that foreign actors are somehow interfering with democracy in deliberative discourse are counterintuitively allowing for the further erosion of democracy and deliberative discourse. Can you expand on this in relation to the current allegations of foreign interference?
Yep. So in tracking, I think we've tracked 79 countries that in the last 10 years have passed misinformation foreign election interference laws. They very, very frequently will cite or point to democratic nations, so US, Canada, France, Germany, UK, Australia, for why they're doing what they're doing. And the justification tends to fall under the broad rubric of national security, right? And so that's why my fears of using legislative means only to curtail some of this stuff is dangerous, because other countries, less democratic ones, without the guardrails that we have in Canada, will use our rhetoric to basically pass and justify their own laws. So one example is, I believe Kyrgyzstan passed a pretty broad law, which allows the government to take down content and censor whatever they dislike. They specifically cited as reasons for doing this the UK white paper on online harms, NetzDG, the German bill, and I think there was a French fake news bill that they also cited. So again, I don't want to say that we should just ignore what's happening in Canada. I just think we have to be very careful about how we frame it and specifically call out what are the effects and what are the outcomes. And I think the testimonies of the other panelists are really important for bringing that out. And it's why I also highlight transnational repression is not the same as other types of foreign interference.
And so how would you specifically define transnational oppression or repression? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think there are two big points to it. One, that it's directed by a foreign government, and it's happening on our territory.
So I raised that because I'm from Hamilton, and anecdotally, you know, we witnessed this back in September of 2019 when McMaster students hosted a Uyghur activist, a well-known Uyghur activist, Rukuki Turdush, and I apologize if the pronunciation isn't right, and it was disrupted by students who were bussed in and disrupted. Would this fit that kind of action?
It could, but we need more evidence, right? We can't assume that just because people are against the speaker that they're automatically being influenced and told what to do by the Chinese government.
So in your title of that article that I referenced, you said the risks of exaggerating foreign influence. And, you know, is it your opinion that these risks are being exaggerated in the case of the allegations that are before us here in Canada today?
I think this comes back to which allegations, right? So are we talking about writ large online influence operations, or are we talking about very targeted harassment? So I think with the targeted harassment, we're not exaggerating those impacts. I think those are very, very clear, and they have pretty long-lasting impacts, as evidenced by the other panelists. Where I'm a little more ambivalent about the effects and the effectiveness is these broad, you know, misinformation campaigns or influence operations. It's hard to tell exactly what the impact of those are. And so that's the one area I'm a little more hesitant to speculate on.
So from my perspective, over the last 5 or 6 years, watching the way in which AI, algorithms, online information, disinformation, troll farms, you know, I myself would suggest I've been the target of troll farms, which are obviously artificial accounts that are targeted and directed on any given political decision. And I would make the following statement that in Canada, particularly given the convoy and the occupation and this kind of rise of right-wing populism, democracy is fragile. People are cynical, and they've lost trust in a lot of our democratic institutions. And this prevalence of information online, particularly as it relates to targeting and, you know, the studies around how the brain interacts with social media, do you not see that as a potential like hostile actor within the context of Canadian democracy?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong on any of those points you just made. I think back to my statement, we also have to understand why people might be consuming this, and this gets back to the grievances, right? How do we rebuild trust in the institution and media?
Yeah, you referenced this. You stated that an overemphasis on bad actors and the supply of disinformation diverts our attention from the material problems that drive demand for and receptivity to dubious content and suspicious origin. Can you describe how ignoring the material problems that Canadians are facing can make them more susceptible to foreign influence?
As brief as you can, Ms. Lim. We've got 12 seconds.
That's fine. I'm going to set that aside, and then I'm going to have about 2.5-minute rounds, and you can just open with that.
Okay, sorry. So should I go?
No,
I'll
think
get in the next round.
Mr. Green will have 2.5 minutes. Thank you. That completes our first round. We're going to go to our second round of questioning. Just to advise the committee, we're going to have Conservatives for 5, Liberals for 5, the bloc pour 2.5.
2.5 minutes for the block.
2.5, and then we're going to move into our next panel after that. So this, Mr. Kirk, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and let me start by saying a big thank you to the witnesses for your bravery for coming today and your continued advocacy and speaking out about these and all of the associated issues. To Mr. Toti, can you expand a little bit as to how Uyghurs who live in Canada have faced pressure and influence and threats and intimidation by the communist dictatorship in Beijing? Could you expand a little bit on what that's looked like and some personal experience or those who you know?
Thank you. It is a long list, and we have been just passing this information to our government officials since early 2000. For example, I'm a Canadian citizen, but I'm Uyghur Canadian, and you are also a Canadian citizen and are holding the same passport. And if the one Uyghur Canadian and another the Canadian citizen just go to Chinese the consulate to get a Chinese visa, and you get totally different the forms and the procedures, and the Uyghur Canadians goes totally different. And they will ask, for example, how you remain in Canada, whether you applied asylum or not. And you have to receive invitation from your parents. And your relatives and all of them, they have to have a security clearance. There's so many things. And also you have to sign the pledge to loyalty to Chinese Communist Party if you are Uyghur Canadian. And for example, and that also effectively isolate the Uyghur Canadian from their family members and creates that kind of fear. Okay, if I go to protest, here's the consequence. And I may not see my parents again, or I cannot invite my parents to come to see me because passport is given by the government. And the Uyghur Canadians are subject to totally set of rules by the Chinese government, not only in China, here in Canada as well. For that reason, just a regular phone call, just threaten them not to participate in any protest. That is very standard, but it goes much further, to be informant for Chinese government and report whatever happened in Canada. And then don't go anything that against the interests of Chinese, the Communist Party.
Thank you very much for this, and I know that time is limited. So if there are further examples or stories that you have, please feel free to follow up with this committee. And certainly, I think that what you've shared today behooves us to take this seriously, and I appreciate that, Mr. Kwan. You've talked about some of the examples of how the communist dictatorship in Beijing puts pressure on Canadians and Canadian democratic infrastructure. How commonly known was this prior to some of these recent revelations? Can you expand as to how well known it was amongst yourself and others within the Chinese diaspora in this country?
Very commonly known. In fact, we've been saying all along for the last 15, 20 years. And we've seen a lot of this on the ground, obviously. And many of these have not been reported, or if they were reported to the local police or the RCMP, they will not be handled because they're of lack of evidence. That's why in 2017, many of us band together and collect evidences and testimonies in which we've produced the harassment and intimidation report together with Amnesty International and submitted it to the relevant government departments.
So just in the time that I have left, if we have all this evidence, why do you think there has been a hesitancy or a refusal to act on behalf of the government?
I'm not sure. We have not gotten any acknowledgement so far. Wow. Normally you write a letter to the MP or to the minister, you get at least acknowledgement saying, we received your letter, we'll pass it on to somebody else. We did not even get these letters.
Can I ask who you sent this information to?
Well, first of all, we sent it to through the GAC, and then, of course, to RCMPs. And RCMP is primarily the one that we are trying to deal with.
Were there any ministers that you had sent to?
I believe we have copied to some ministers. I'm not even. I don't remember who exactly was.
Okay.
Was copied.
Would you be able to send us that information? Would that be possible?
If I can find it, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Keurig. Next, we're going to go to Ms. Hefner for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and I Mr. Kwan, I kind of want to go back to something that you mentioned about Markham Unionville, and I want to say that I'm not the least bit surprised that Paul Chang won that election. He was a police officer in the region for 28 years. He speaks 8 languages, and he's been an excellent member of parliament for the last 2 years, so I just wanted to put that on the record. And I wanted to further ask you about the length of time that you believe there's been foreign influence by China in Canada. You mentioned that this has been going on since the 90s, that you testified before Parliamentary Committee in 2006. So this is a problem that spans several governments. And I would like you to give us an idea about how the problem has maybe changed or developed over that time.
For one, China has become more sophisticated, more subtle. In the early efforts, China was seen as very kind of bumbling in many ways, and perhaps not taken seriously by our elected officials or law enforcement. But China has now kind of upped their game, if you were, in such a way that many of these things that we're dealing with is very subtle. I can point you to, one thing, that China does not play by the rules of engagement that we know in the West. Contracts. We think that we have a contract with a Chinese company to install X-ray machines in all our embassies around the world. And the contract says, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. Thou shalt not share the information. We don't believe that the Chinese will follow that kind of contract. Because we in the Western world think a contract is a contract. If I engage a Chinese company into processing visa in China for Canadian consulates, we think that, these employees that they hire will abide by the rules of privacy and whatever the contract says. But that, in fact, is not the case. Chinese government has a way to getting their people loyal to the party, loyal to the government, loyal to the country, to do what is needed to do. And I don't think we should be there should be any surprise that they would do that.
Thank you. And I would turn now to Ms. Lim. You mentioned xenophobia in your opening statement, and I'm wondering if you can sort of describe how foreign interference and conversations about foreign interference can affect the experience of Chinese Canadians and perhaps their participation in the democratic process in Canada.
Yeah, for sure. So very briefly, again, I don't want to directly say correlation is causation, right? But we see this in other communities as well. So when there's criticism of Israel, for example, there is reports of increased anti-Semitic attacks. Similarly, over coronavirus, there was increased resentment towards Chinese immigrants. Similarly, after 9/11, there was a lot of backlash for people who are perceived not even Arab, brown. It's so this is the general ballpark we're dealing with. And so I think we just have to be careful about how we word certain things. I think repeatedly stating this is the CCP, the actions of the Chinese Communist Party, as opposed to writ large Chinese people, right? And I think most of you know this already, so this is old hat. But I think just being wary of what language we use, because we should be criticizing the CCP and pulling out all, bringing light to everything they're doing. But I would also like to not risk getting spat in my face or called a racial slur on the street, right? So I think that's just my caveat. We just have to be careful about how we frame things.
Would you say that allegations even of foreign influence has an effect on whether a Chinese Canadian would, say, volunteer in a political campaign or work in a political office? Does it affect the way they can fully participate in our democratic process the way they may want to?
Short answer, please.
Yeah, I would say with the current evidence, no, I can't give you a definitive answer.
Okay, and I apologize, Ms. Lim. You always seem to be at the tail end of the time there, so I don't like doing this, believe me. So, Monsieur Villemure, 2 minutes.
2.5 minutes for Mr. Villemure. I'll come back to Mr. Kwan. If you could send us the report from 2017, that would be great. Did you hear the question? Okay. In your opinion, Chinese interference in Canada, has it increased since the Liberals came to power in 2015?
I don't think I can say anything about that just because I don't, as Ms. Lim said, there's no causation involved in this. I don't want to. I think it was just as strong during the conservative times of Prime Minister Harper. However, just because it was increased last 7 years doesn't mean that it was because of Liberal government. No, okay.
Yeah. La période peut-être.
Maybe it was just the time. What would be the advantage for Beijing to destabilize democratic countries?
Yes, Beijing has been doing that all over the world, and Canada is no exception. And I point to Australia, our cousin, basically a very similar country size and population and demographics. China has been working on Australia for many, many years. And Australia stood up first by having very strong rules about engagement with Chinese CCP, as by its elected officials, as well as enforcing and establishing the Foreign Agent Registry. Of course, Australia suffered. They had trade sanctions. They have been harassed by China. But I admire their courage of standing up to Canada. I mean, to China, sorry.
In a few seconds, do you believe that a public, independent inquiry would be necessary to allow Canadians to feel safer?
Yes, I think so. I think a former Prime Minister of Australia mentioned just a week ago on TV, saying that all you need is sunshine. Mm-hmm. You know, shine a light on these things in the public mode. It not only helps us look at the things, but it also tells China that, you know, you cannot go by under the table anymore. Everything you do is going to be exposed to the public, and let the public judge.
Okay, merci.
Thank you.
Villemure, Mr. Kwan. Mr. Green, final intervention for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Lim, you had started in one of your previous interventions offering some of your other additional policy kind of specifics. I want to give you some short time right now just to expand on other things to put on the record that we should be considering.
Yeah, for sure. So I think this was probably touched upon already, but accountability, like really calling out officials if needed and necessary. So this could be calling in diplomats of the relevant countries, putting out very public statements condemning these kind of actions, increasing, you know, the evidence, again, like Mr. Kwan said, shedding sunlight on what's happening. I think that's really important. I think there needs to be a lot more done to support victims and targeted communities. And so I think, yeah, FBI has a hotline, and they have, I think in the UK, when there were attacks against Iranian diaspora, law enforcement had offered protection, digital training, very basic security training, also training. So if there was an agency set up to deal specifically with transnational repression, there should be good training so they understand what's actually happening for the victims, and also to not re-victimize folks that have been already targeted. So for example, you could be targeted as, you know, a diaspora community, but that might also put you under more surveillance under law enforcement, and that's not necessarily good when they've already had really bad experiences with law enforcement. So just being cognizant of all of those things. I also think last point is engaging with the private sector. We know a lot of the harassment comes through Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, WeChat, what have you. And so also it's hard because they're for-profit companies and they're often located or headquartered elsewhere. But seeing how they can play a role in this, and also, sorry, I'm just like rattling off things.
No, this is why we need you on the record.
Exploring targeted sanctions against companies that are exporting or selling technology to countries that use this against individuals. I will leave it at that.
Well, I have one final question, because you talk about foreign interference. Many of the examples are from non-Western countries interfering in Western democracies. Would you be able to provide a little bit of a comment or reflection on the ways in which Western democracies also interfere in foreign elections around the world?
Yeah, 100%. This happens all the time, US and Canada, right? The United States is probably it's our biggest neighbor. They're constantly influencing us, whether or not we like it. That's why we have CanCon laws. Trucker convoy, I think you mentioned earlier, there was a lot of, I think, influence from the US politicians. There was money being funneled from the United States. We should also be cognizant of that. And there could have been harassment as well.
We're 30 seconds over, Mr. Green.
Okay, I will just say, yes, it does happen between democracies as well.
Thank you, Ms. Lim. Okay, that concludes our first round. I want to thank all our witnesses for being here and providing us with what I believe was valuable and compelling information today. Mr. Kwan, Mr. Toti, Ms. Lim, thank you on behalf of the committee for appearing and on behalf of Canadians. We are going to suspend for a few minutes in order to prepare for the next panel. I am going to give advance warning to committee members that we're going to have the same amount of time in the rounds, very similar what we just did in this first panel. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. We'll make it quick. Thanks. Back to the meeting, everyone. We're just about to start our second panel. Can we have order in the room, please? Everybody take your seats so we can get started. First of all of the testing, toutes les tests sont complètes.
All the tests have been completed.
Aussi en français.
For Mr. Villemur, I've said it in French.
3 witnesses in front of us for our second panel, and I want to welcome from the Chinese Canadian Concern Group on the Chinese Communist Party's human rights violation, Mr. Bill Chu, who is the spokesperson. Mr. Chu is with us on video, as you can see. And from Alliance Canada Hong Kong, we have Sherry Wong, who is the executive director. Thank you, Sherry, for being here this morning. And Ai Min Lau, who is an advisor. As you can see, all of our witnesses are via video conference today. Mr. Chu, we're going to start with you for 5 minutes to address the committee. Please go ahead. Yeah, you're just on mute there, Mr. Chu, sorry. I know we've been at this for 3 years now, and it's forgetting to press that button. There you go. Go ahead, sir. 5 minutes.
Morning, Chair, and honorable members of the committee. I'm Bill Chu from Vancouver, BC, arguably the beachhead for PLC's unrestricted warfare in Canada. That name is coined after a 1999 book of the same name by 2 PLA corporals describing a new warfare which do not use conventional weapons like guns and bombs, but stealth weapons ranging from disinformation via media, influence buying by bribes, sex, trade, fame, threats, etc., as well as cyber hacking, data harvesting, and intellectual espionage. So no soldiers are required to be transported in, as the idea is to convert locals into its foot soldiers. It's a perfect plan, as by blurring the boundaries or even presence of a war, PRC has also gained the image of a so-called peace-seeking country. However, through WeChat and other things, PRC has been silently sending official news and directives to tens and thousands of Chinese students and immigrants here. Coupled with pro-PRC local Chinese language media and social platforms, PRC had gained more influence over a large part of the local Chinese community than arguably Canada itself. It can and has mobilized large groups of Chinese here when needed. Undoubtedly, Canadians have sensed something amiss after hearing all kinds of PRC undue influences in Canada, but are unsure whether the government is aware of the seriousness or had a plan to deal with them. Sadly, such unpreparedness and attempts to even trivialize the danger were exposed in the PM's latest reaction to the news of PRC's election interference. It is easy to underestimate China, which for decades kept its head low. But fast forward to its entry in WTO, and the world has since been bedazzled by its rocket-like rise that most forgot. PRC is a one-party authoritarian state which outlaws ideological pluralism. So communism should never be mixed up, even by the self-proclaimed progressives, as a legitimate choice, since accepting it ironically means no more choice. Accordingly, China's leaders do not need a popular vote to get in or stay in power. So for 7 decades, they develop a habit of ignoring the people's outcries or rights, but rely on propagandas, lies, and brutal suppression to control dissent. And it's easy to do when three branches of the government are only supposed to serve the party's interest. And China, for decades, was separated from the world. But with PRC entering the world stage, its leaders have to struggle to maintain the validity of its problematic ideology and related wild claims in front of not just its people, but the world's. So within the secret warfare it's waging globally, it spent billions on buying or expanding media, on propagandas, including getting full-page ads and inserts in prominent Western papers. And by dismissing any criticism of CPP as baseless lies, or lately as quoted unquoted anti-Chinese racism. To prepare for the latter, they have for decades intentionally mixed up the use of the terms CCP, the party, China, the state, and Chinese, the people. The purpose are simply to silence criticisms against the CCP by equating that or as criticisms of all Chinese, and also to rouse up a distorted sense of nationalism among all Chinese, including the diaspora. The fact is, PRC's United Front's work department has long been at work within the Chinese diaspora communities. The 70s in particular was an opportune time for CCP in Canada, as Canada just removed the last of all the discriminatory legislations against the Chinese, and with Chinese Canadians entering a more equitable and stable life, most old local Chinese clan organizations discovered their historical mandate was suddenly gone. In Vancouver, a notable example is the CPA of Vancouver, a sad story of a century-old Chinatown association whose name recognition was quickly identified as exploitable by the CCP, and which in recent years was seen in full-page ads in Chinese language papers, dutifully leading hundreds of Chinese organizations echoing their support for China's draconian policies.
Okay, Mr. Chu, we're beyond the 5 minutes at this point. I know that members of the committee are going to have lots of questions. If we can just stop it there, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're going to go next to Ms. Wong and Ms. Lau. I understand that you're going to be splitting your 5 minutes, and we'll start with you, Ms. Wong, or Ms. Lau.
We're going to be doing a little bit of back and forth.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. Hello, bonjour. Je vous remercie.
I would like to thank you for inviting us to testify today.
And my name is Iman Lau, and I'm an advisor to Alliance Canada Hong Kong. I'm currently based in Taiwan as a research analyst at the Taiwanese civil society organization Doublethink Lab.
Good morning, folks. My name is Sherry Wong. I'm in Ottawa, and I am the Executive Director of Alliance Canada Hong Kong. Thank you for having us. Foreign interference in our institutions is not new. Since the 1990s, Chinese dissident communities have raised attention to foreign overreach in every aspect of Canadian society, not just elections, but in research, in civil society, in academic spaces, as well as in private businesses. Though the diaspora are the primary target of foreign interference operations, Beijing targets all persons of influence, and many Canadians are unaware of their tactics. This committee has also convened to discuss the issue of rising xenophobia in Canada. While I am glad to see such an open discussion on foreign interference in Canadian elections, it is disappointing to see media, political, and social discourses leaving out important cultural insight from diaspora communities who have valuable and first-hand knowledge, such as the ability to differentiate between a person of interest, a target of foreign influence, a willing compliance, an active agent, and someone with ties to the consulate. Some of these sensationalized perspectives have stoked racist and xenophobic sentiments towards Asians in Canada, and they do not offer nuances that dissident voices from Tibet, Hong Kong, and the Uyghur communities can bring. As a racialized diasporic organization, we're only invited to comment on xenophobia, even when we have written reports and heavily consulted on foreign influence in Canada. Meanwhile, governments and media are engaging with experts, not in these spaces, trying to summarize their research on the very things that we, the diaspora, are seeing on the front lines. Anti-Asian racism is growing in Canada, and threats of transnational state-sponsored violence has also intensified in recent years. The diaspora communities are excluded in the Canadian discourse while surviving Beijing's overreach in our communities. The notion that all ethnic Chinese communities are supporter of the Chinese authorities is racist and reductive. These communities are not a monolith, but are vibrant and diverse in language, culture, and politics. Our community members have long observed foreign interference activities under our noses, writing nomination forms handed out during consulate-affiliated demonstrations, officials from the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office cozying up to elected officials, ethnic reporters attending Beijing-backed conferences, photo ops to wine and dine business and political elites.
When the diaspora resists Beijing's transnational controls, dissidents' tires are slashed, activists are harassed and threatened, international students' study permits are declined, and passports applications are rejected. Overt criticism of Beijing or pointing out the PRC's influence operations could cost people career opportunities, business prospects, research funding, bar them from going to the PRC, and even jeopardize their personal safety and their extended family members. Is it any wonder that many self-censor due to Beijing's effective global system of control and surveillance? Therefore, we would like to make the following recommendations for the committee to consider. First, take a whole of society approach to addressing foreign interference, as it is interconnected in all facets of Canadian society. Overlooking any aspect will only harm the most vulnerable communities. Second, provide anonymous and secured spaces to voice concerns in order to minimize repercussions from hostile foreign actors. Third, engage with marginalized communities and center cultural and linguistic sensitivity in our approach. Our testimony today focuses on the community's lived experience and expert knowledge into Beijing's foreign influence activities. I also want to take this opportunity to urge policymakers to rebuild trust with diaspora communities, many of whom have felt long unheard and erased. It would be also naive to think that the PRC is the only nation engaging in these actions. We urge the committee to pursue country-agnostic solutions and also look to the other diasporas for their insights. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lau and Ms. Wong. It's probably late in Taiwan right now, I would imagine. Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes to begin your intervention.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for joining us. I appreciate your work. As experts in your field, I guess I'll start with Ms. Wong because I watched or I saw a clip of your appearance on a Canadian panel show, and you talked about the threat for you appearing on the show. Now, just by virtue of appearing on television, it isn't the risk. The risk is a result of your work, where you've gained your expertise on foreign election interference. Can you speak to what led to that point and how that threat would manifest itself for you?
I'd be happy to. I think this is where the conversation gets a little complicated. When we talk about foreign interference and influence, it's not necessarily activities that we can outright identify and say, this is a foreign state intervening in my life. But some of the examples I could give is since last Friday when I appeared on CBC, my home internet has been incredibly slow. I've been getting more spam calls and more phishing emails and more spam texts, but is that an act of foreign interference or influence? I don't know. I do not have the expertise to identify whether these are a result of my appearance on media. But I think the overarching issue is that the community is afraid to appear because they have seen extreme cases of where activists and dissidents are threatened through social media, through in-person events. We've had community members talk about their tires getting slashed after attending a June 4th memorial event. So the range of threats and interference into our lives is not a simple, this happened, or we could be able to identify it. We're not security experts, but I will point the committee to one of our past reports. It's a investigation into Beijing's overreach globally in response to Hong Kongers' democratic demonstrations, where we saw there were global coordinated efforts in countering Hong Kongers' efforts to protest overseas.
Thank you. Would you be able to send that report to the committee clerk? Okay, thank you. She agreed. Ms. Lau, could you talk about how Beijing's how Beijing attempts to influence politics in Canada? Now, I'm picking up on something Ms. Wong said about these, tires being slashed and other activities. Is the climate of fear that's used particularly against diaspora communities in Canada, is that one of the main tools of their influence and interference attempts?
So climate of fear is definitely a tool. However, I wouldn't say it is necessarily a main tool. This is very much one of the strategies in a whole range of tactics that can be used. Now, here's the tricky part, I think, that we need to address in discussing foreign interference, is that it is not just influencing, let's say, politics. It's not just siloed to the ballot, to the voting day or whatnot. This reaches into our cultural and social infrastructures. It reaches into our, I would say also the research. I had mentioned research was another area. And in terms of politics, I would say that we have certainly seen efforts to increase civic engagement and observed efforts to increase civic engagement I would say by affiliate organizations, but it's very difficult for us to outright and point to one particular example and say that is foreign interference. It's a very tricky and nuanced subject to navigate through.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chu, with about a minute remaining for my time, can you share some examples of intimidation or influence attempts that targeted your group? And you're on mute, sir.
Address it as to the community rather than just our group, because over time we have been in the community watching or monitoring how things are developing within the Chinese community in Vancouver area, and we have seen the pro CCP elements have been able to mobilize a large group of people to do counter protests. Even when a group of people are concerned about the situation in Hong Kong, say, we noticed that there have been, and you probably have noticed, crashes, physical crashes, public ones on the street. And that's something, to us is not acceptable and is one of the prime examples. And among our group, by the way, there's also one individual that have received phone threats, direct threats in the evening at her home number, and threatening her. So that those things are happening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you, Mr. Chu. Mr. Fergus, 6 minutes.
Much to our witnesses who are here. I think my first questions will be towards Ms. Lau and Ms. Wong. Really did appreciate your presentation as well as the recommendations that you had. One of the recommendations in terms of the whole of society approach, I can understand that. Regarding your second one, to create anonymous and secure space for people to be able to share information with Canadian authorities so that we could better have an idea of who is acting in ways which put extraordinary pressure on the diasporic communities. I was wondering, could you elaborate on that, and could you elaborate on it also with a view to how do we ensure that the United Front Workers Department doesn't use that same tool to spread more misinformation and sort of mix up the cards by identifying people who we know who are doing good work, like the work that the two of you are doing?
Important question. I think first off, we speak about the climate of fear, and that's why we need those anonymous and secure spaces where diaspora can have that trust and have that ability to express the concerns and their observations. It is true that United Front Work Department and their agents will probably use that very same space to dilute the information that is being received by the Canadian government. I think this is where we need to be proactive, not only in identifying the state actors who are active in Canada. This is the job of our enforcement intelligence agencies, but also to actually do public source research. A lot of the times, the United Front actually publishes the individuals and the names and the organizations that are affiliated with them. And if you do use Chinese language research and open source research, you'll be able to identify these agencies and organizations. I can hand it to Ayman if she had anything to add.
Yeah, I would also just say that if this is the concern, I would also look to civil society in terms of, I think public source information is a really useful tool in this case. The information and is quite easily searched. I think we just need the capacity to search for it. So civil society organizations can come and fill this gap.
To the two of you, if you, I hope you had watched a previous panel. There was a suggestion that we should take a look at the Australian model of a public foreign agent registry. Do you think that's a good move to take?
I would say that a Foreign Agent Registry Act is certainly, or Foreign Agents Registry is certainly a good first step. However, I do agree with the criticisms we did here at the previous panel. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that it is limited in scope. I think also maybe perhaps looking towards Australia to see how has the implementation of such an act, or other countries who may have also implemented similar acts, how has that implementation gone and what is the impacts? And are we seeing the objectives being achieved? And where are the lessons to learn from there?
If I could jump in as well, the Foreign Influence Transparency Scheme in Australia actually only limits to political engagement. So it still leaves a huge gap in other sectors such as research, private sector, and civil society, where foreign agents and foreign affiliated agents are able to use their resources and money and intervene. So it is something to consider. I think it's the right step, but it has to be a broader reach to be truly effective in countering foreign influence in Canada.
I can easily see that. Is there a gold standard internationally of that kind of registry that does go across different fields to making sure that we have a fuller approach to making sure that we could identify these actors?
I think we can learn from a wide variety of different countries' legislations and take the best pieces of it. But in my opinion, I don't see a gold standard anywhere in the global world right now.
I would also agree with Sherry on that.
One last point. Your third recommendation in terms of engaging with diaspora communities, I couldn't agree more with you on that. And also for us to have a better sense of a better relationship and a deeper relationship of our intelligence services to making sure that they have a fuller understanding of what is felt on the ground. Very briefly, what recommendation would you have to us making sure that our intelligence agencies do have connections? What steps can they take to have a connection with diaspora communities?
This will have to be very brief.
I think first and foremost, probably having the understanding that the diaspora is not a monolithic community. We have Chinese Canadians who have histories with Canada for a very long time, and then we have newcomers from all over the world, and understanding that the Chinese Canadian community may not have ties to the PRC, and as well as engaging with, I would say, understanding linguistically too that Chinese is not the sole language of these groups either.
Thank you, Ms. Lau. Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Monsieur Villemure pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Villemure for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Ms. Lau. Do you believe that the Canadian government is doing enough to build trust with members of the diaspora?
I would say that we certainly could take more steps. I think as well as I would really like to go back and highlight the point that we're not only being today we are not only being asked, we're asked to comment on certain tactics, but I think we should also be part of the solution moving forward. This is something that I would say when we take a whole of society approach, you also need to center the Chinese diaspora in these conversations and also engage with us to help come up with solutions. Additionally, this also includes not just the diaspora, but other targeted communities and the ones that are most vulnerable. I think one of the reasons right now we may be feeling ignored is that certainly there is a dominant conversation, a dominant voice. And today it is it's very heartening to see that we have a more diversity of voices coming to panels like this, but we definitely need to think about how can the diaspora help support addressing foreign interference.
Thank you. Ms. Wong, in the brief that you tabled, you talked about tactics used by the Chinese Communist Party. You've listed 7. Can you give us a brief overview of these 7 tactics so that we can better understand them?
Absolutely. I think, particularly in relation to this conversation, we recorded various acts of political influence and elite capture. So these activities are aimed at powerful people in this country, particularly at the lower levels of governance, such as school boards, municipalities, and regional governance. The goal is not necessarily to advance certain candidates, but to achieve a more favorable environment for Beijing, and that includes the private sector in China. Another is the information and this narrative discursion strategy. I think Chuck earlier spoke about the astroturfing that exists in community spaces, as well as that type of astroturfing happens in the media and in public discourse, where United Front agents aim to present themselves as the sole voice and the sole authority on Chinese communities. And they try to dominate the conversation and turn the conversation into a more favorable narrative for Beijing. Another, I think, a very key section that this committee should definitely review is the United Front Work Department. It is not just a state agency, but actually a party agency of the Chinese Communist Party, which aims to influence and to expand the loyalty towards Beijing. It is occurring at all levels of government. It is happening globally as well. So we can learn from our partners on the global stage where and when we can counter United Front activities. The other ones, I think it's pretty obvious, the harassment and intimidation facing diaspora communities. This continues to be a very huge challenge and a concern for us. We'll see whether there will be safety for diaspora communities after they speak out, but it is quite concerning. The last one I would like to kind of go over quickly is academic influence and vulnerability on intellectual property transfer. Due to the vulnerable funding environment in Canada, a lot of times the CCP utilize their capital and resources so that they are able to fund specific research in Canadian institutions and in the end be able to trade the intellectual property for a very low cost.
In your report, you mentioned that many people are afraid of criticizing the Chinese government because that could cost them. Do you believe that at the macro level, Canada is too dependent on its relationship with China? Is it keeping Canada from acting in certain cases?
I think it's true to say there is a level of dependency on the community level. Due to the underfunding of diaspora and racialized communities, we often have to look elsewhere for funding resources, and that becomes a point of vulnerability where we're able to seek or obtain funding from less reliable sources or suspicious sources. And that goes for every sector in Canada, really. Academic institutions, when researchers lack funding, they look for funding elsewhere. And whoever gives them the most funding for the least amount of burden, that becomes a very vulnerable position for Canadians and Canadian institutions.
If you can tell me in a few words, what is the goal of the Chinese Communist Party with this interference? What is the main goal?
There is a global ambition that is being intensified under the current CCP leadership. But it's not only to seek, ideological alliance, but it's really about advancing their economic and political power globally. And we see that in various means, not only through foreign influence and interference, but also through economic investments that they're undertaking, such as through Belt and Road or Arctic Silk Road initiatives. So really, they're just trying to expand their powers where possible and challenge international norms and ultimately aim to rewrite them.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wong. I did leave a little extra time just because of the interpretation issue. That's okay, no worries. We have Mr. Green next for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thank you, and welcome to all the witnesses. I'm certainly familiar with your work, some of which I've engaged with directly. Ms. Wong, in the CBC article entitled "We Know Where Your Parents Live," Hong Kong activists say that Canadian police are helpless against online threats, and you recount the threats that you received and the inability of police to hold those accountable. I want to bring that up because it was also referenced, I think, in our previous panel as well, this tactic. And I can imagine just how unsettling that would be for anybody, specifically people who might have family back home or even threats that might be veiled here locally. Can you describe the impacts of our law enforcement being unable to help when it comes to doxing or any other forms of harassment?
I mean, first and foremost, we live in a country where there's a long history of systemic and institutionalized violence towards racialized peoples. I think particularly for the Chinese communities, many of us are still fresh with the memories of head tax and other forms of exclusion. So to begin with, there is a level of distrust and a level of insecurity to approach the police on this issue. And on the other hand, when our fellow activists, I'm fairly new in this compared to activists like Chuck, but when folks like Chuck tell me that they've been reporting their acts of harassment and intimidation that they've been reporting since the 90s and no action has been taken, then it really deters me from even ever going to the police in the first place. I, however, have gone into, have reported one of my incidents to the Vancouver Police Department, whom didn't even bother enough to meet me in person to talk about the threat that I have faced that day. And I think in that moment, I realized that policing is not the solution to the threats and intimidation that we are facing.
I can certainly appreciate that perspective. I want to ask, again, previous testimony suggested that resources be made available perhaps to help, to help but scan phones and devices and provide technological solutions for counterintelligence, basically to help in a defensive role. And I want to try to ensure that we have some good recommendations coming forward about things that we can control as a Canadian government versus things that just might be out there on the internet or so on and so forth. So one of your recommendations also included increasing government funding for grassroots and diasporic organizations. Has your organization considered ways within your own community that you can help keep yourself safe in terms of providing resources to community members that might be beneficial for, you'd referenced your internet, you referenced the potential for surveillance and that type of thing, kind of counter surveillance measures that we might be able to help support?
I really appreciate what you mentioned, the, having someone that could help check our phones and help check our cybersecurity network. I think that's something that most dissidents, almost all dissidents, would take advantage of. We do not have any guidelines aside from what we develop, and it is community knowledge that is helping each other right now. For our organization, we have certain security measures that we ask all of our volunteers to follow, having a VPN, having an alias email, having a second phone if necessary. But these are all extra steps that require resources and dedicated funding. And it is simply not possible for all dissidents and all Chinese Canadians to have all of these resources so that they could protect themselves. So I think there needs to be a bit more of a systemic change and attitude change in how we address these types of issues.
Mr. Chu, now in your life's work, can you comment on other resources that might be made available to folks in the diaspora that are living here that might be helpful in a counter surveillance type effort? Or I should say an effort to defend against foreign surveillance and foreign intimidation?
I think in our work, we constantly run into almost a dysfunctionality between the RCMP and the CSIS. Both of which are supposed to work together, but I find that we find that there's a big gap there, meaning that we complain to the RCMP, but nothing really happened, just like the others have mentioned. And as far as CSIS is concerned, they are also painfully aware that some of their research information did not really trickle down to all the politicians. So I think right off the bat, it's also the system itself that's not functioning well.
Can I ask a question specific to that? And please feel free not to answer, and I don't want to put anybody in jeopardy asking this, but would it be helpful, or has it ever been the case? Like, does CSIS ever let folks in your community know that they're being the target? Like, is that information ever shared? Is there ever any that might help them safeguard? Is that something that you might think could be helpful if they had information to share it with you as a target, or is that maybe a national security kind of?
I think for the average Chinese Canadian, they are not even aware of the role or exact role of the CSIS. Most people, if they ever got threatened, they would go to the RCMP. But if they approach the RCMP, did not go anywhere, as far as they are concerned, then, we lost trust with the system. So that rebuilding of the trust is very important. And it goes right up to the top, including what, our PM has been responding, which is very disappointing to say the least.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Chu. Concludes our first round of questioning. Just a reminder, we're going to go Conservative, Liberal, and then 2.5 for the Bloc and the NDP. That'll be the end of the panel. And I know, Mr. Villemure, you have something you'd like to say at the end. Mr. Couric, I have you on the list. Mr. Barrett, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to split my time with Mr. Couric. So if you'll just indulge me, I'm just going to give notice of motion, and that's that the committee, in relation to its study of foreign election interference, invite Katie Telford, Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, to appear alone for 3 hours provided that she be sworn or affirmed. I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Couric.
Okay, thank you. Notice of motion is accepted. Go ahead, Mr. Couric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me first, again, with this panel, thank the witnesses for their bravery and activism and work and fighting both for your community, for the rights of the Chinese diaspora in Canada and around the world, and appreciate that you are involved in this conversation. Mr. Chu, in your opening statement, you talked about the Prime Minister's reaction, that it seemed to trivialize, I think was the word that you used, the seriousness of the issue. I understand that you have written the Prime Minister outlining some of your concerns about the communist dictatorship in Beijing's interference in Canada. I'm wondering, I'd like to give you about a minute if you could maybe expand on what you wrote to the Prime Minister. Mr. Chu.
I think it's not so much what I wrote, but our group had actually wrote an open letter. But essentially it's trying to underline the fact that so much had been happening, right in our community, and we are not seeing the appropriate responses. And we urge the government to focus on simple things like the media, the Chinese language media, what they are doing within the community. Now I can't recall exactly what the words we said, but essentially, it's under the guise or the cover of another language. They can get away with a different version of reality. That's what we are facing as a community. And that's been also causing fear among so many people, because once you have a government, which is a one-party government, and only had one focus, then we are the only community that's really exposed to that kind of brainwashing almost. In other words, the kind of narratives and philosophy, ideology are different from what the average Canadians are exposed to. And that's a very, oppressive feeling. We don't have diversity in terms of our news commentating, or getting narrower and narrower. So, it's a shrinking kind of freedom that we are having in that sense.
Thank you for that. And just to clarify, that open letter that you sent to the Prime Minister and the government, did you receive a response?
Not that we can recall.
Okay. Thank you for that. You mentioned something that I found really concerning, and that's that the communist dictatorship in Beijing is exploiting the Chinese diaspora, and in particular the history, and in many cases the rich history that makes up much of Canada. And I'd like to give you an opportunity if you can expand a little bit on that. You had mentioned an organization in particular in Vancouver. How does the CCP exploit both the Chinese diaspora? You'd mentioned language, newspapers and news sources, and heritage. Just in about 50 seconds that I've left, could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, first of all, the Chinese community had undergone a long history of discrimination in Canada until the 60s, 70s. That's only when all those legislation were removed. And so, the CCP is trying to exploit that history to remind most Chinese Canadians that they need motherland to protect them, almost, in their way of expressing it. And they are trying to combine it with the current situation, the tension between East and West, to suggest that, this is all these are just, China bullying, and use the phrase racism as an excuse to deflect any criticisms launched against the CCP. And those are the ways that they are using history to try to pull the heartstrings of so many Chinese Canadians.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chu. Mr. Baines, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for coming here and, for joining us and trying to be part of the solution here. I'm trying to determine the impact of the multimedia messages and what it means to participating in our electoral process. I live in Richmond, British Columbia. It's one of the most diverse cities in probably all of Canada. In fact, the United Nations has actually recognized we have a 5-kilometer stretch in the city. It's called the Highway to Heaven. You have over 28 different faith-based organizations all situated side by side. And I've lived there my whole life, and I've tried to, engage with communities, but one community does stand out, and I know Ms. Wong maybe mentioned this earlier. Everybody sort of has in terms of the fear, and we often try to engage the Chinese community, and if you're knocking on their door, they're not opening it, or there's a level of lack of registering, giving personal information and those kinds of things. So, if we're looking at messages they're receiving on social media platforms, how can our security services distinguish between materials written in, say, Cantonese, Mandarin, that originate from, say, a government source in China, and those written by Canadians that here in Canada? Chinese Canadians. Anybody, if Ms. Wong maybe, and yeah, Ms. Wong, please.
Sounds good. I can point folks to our report in plain sight, particularly in the information and narrative discursion warfare section. So yes, while CCP uses their formal state, platforms on WeChat, on Weibo to talk about their ideology and their narratives, those narratives are also repeated by media outlets that have friendly relationships with the CCP. We see that through training camps where Beijing would host ethnic Chinese language media all around the world to come and talk about how to tell a good China story. So while these ethnic Chinese language media aren't exactly state outlets, they are repeating state narratives. So these are the types of kind of gray area and nuances that we have to navigate and to learn how to counter. Another aspect is, the use of influencers and social media key opinion leaders to tell China's story. So while they are individuals who are not state affiliated, their narratives are parroting the state's narrative points. And for us in the community, when we read these coverage and these types of posts, it's really clear to us that it is parroting exactly what the state would have said, but it would be a lot more difficult for people who do not have the digital literacy training or the background knowledge to identify these as state narratives.
Okay, and then, if we're comparing it,
I think my colleague,
Ms.
Wong,
Wong,
would actually have a lot to add on this. So
I think Mr. Baines may have another question here. So, Mr. Baines, or are you going to continue on with?
Yeah, just maybe Ms. Lau can join in and just give us maybe a comparison of, say, domestic, misinformation, disinformation, even in local Canadian content or American content.
Hi, yeah. So I just wanted to also point out that a lot of this is when we talk about the interconnected facets of foreign interference, Sherry had brought up the point that a lot of the underfunding of these communities also contribute to these problems. So for example, for media, a lot of these incentives to produce, I would say, or reproduce party lines is due to business deals and being opened up to the China market. There are levers there that would also, for example, the difference between different social media platforms in China and how they interact with overseas media. That's something to look into, certainly. I can say, observing Chinese language media, there are not a lot of resources being funded for ethnic reporters. A lot of these companies are marketing companies instead. And additionally, so there's no real, I would say, original reporting being done in Chinese language media that is being reproduced.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lau.
Sorry.
That's the time.
That's
Mr.
the time?
Baines? Yeah, sorry. Monsieur Villemure.
Mr. Villemure, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chu, in a few words, do you believe that the Government of Canada understands China well?
I don't, simply by looking at how their responses to so many infiltrations and undue influence have been. And I don't think they are aware of the fact that China is using a lot of government organized but non-governmental organizations, both locally and overseas, even totally apparently harmless names, for example, Chinese Students and Scholars Association, that kind of global organizations are literally controlling so many university student bodies, in Canada and elsewhere.
Apologies to interrupt. Same question to Ms. Wong. Do you think that Canada truly understands China?
Without people with cultural and linguistic expertise in making these decisions, no, we do not have the capacity to truly understand Beijing or the leadership right now.
Ms. Wong, do you believe that a public and independent inquiry into the relationship between Canada and China and interference would be a good thing?
We may have lost Ms. Wong here. I see that. Stop your time, Mr. Villemure. I see her screen has been frozen. Ms. Lau, are you able to? Oh, Ms. Wong, are you back?
I believe I'm having some internet issue, but if you can hear me, I can.
I think you referenced that in your opening statement, did you not?
Yeah, it's almost as if they were watching.
Okay. Please go ahead. I'm starting the time again.
Thank you so much. I think there are crucial needs to rebuild trust in our democratic institutions, and for the public to be able to watch and understand what's happening, it's very important. On the other hand, I also understand that the diasporic communities who would have want to participate in this conversation, in this inquiry, may not feel safe in a public forum and may not feel safe in an open investigation. So I look to my community to see what type of engagement they would like to have in looking into foreign interference and influence in Canada.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wong. Merci, Monsieur Villemure. Mr. Green, final intervention, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lau, you had mentioned, and I think a very important point, country agnostic solutions. Would you agree that the sole fixation in this particular case, solely pertaining to the allegations of Chinese interference, perhaps might miss the point, particularly as it arises to finding solutions that would hopefully safeguard against other diasporic communities? If you could just reflect on that and maybe share more further why you think it's important to have all the communities involved be a part of this process and not just leave it up to one diasporic community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the sole focus right now, one of the benefits might be to also, as was previously mentioned in the other panel, sunlight is best. And we definitely need to learn from the tactics. We definitely need to see what these tactics are to inoculate ourselves from it. But at the same time, foreign interference electoral meddling is nothing new. And we can reasonably expect it to be a problem in the future, a challenge in the future for all of us to address. So I do hope that we are considering, while this is the, I would say, in the spotlight at the moment, I do hope that we are considering what solutions we have moving forward and how do we protect ourselves and be proactive in these solutions. I think also, for example, on the issue of foreign transnational repression, which is something that was brought up as well. It is not just the Chinese diaspora that is facing this issue. It is other communities, Syrians, Iranians, Ukrainians. We need to look at these other communities to not only see that this is a challenge that is siloed but is interconnected, and that we have lessons and things that we can learn from each other. I think, as well as I'm sure many of my fellow activists, Sherry and Bill, can also speak to this, it's a very lonely world to be targeted by foreign transnational repression. Something that we always say to each other is, I think I'm crazy for thinking that something is happening. But when we talk about it and we see that this is an actual issue and there are other people, we also build community resilience.
Thank you so much to all the witnesses present, and we certainly appreciate your testimony here today.
Thank you, Mr. Green. That concludes this round of questioning and this panel. On behalf of the committee and on behalf of Canadians, I do want to thank you, Mr. Chu, Ms. Wong, and Ms. Lau for taking the time today to appear before this committee. The information that you provided and will provide has been extremely valuable, and I think all committee members will agree on that. Thank you. We're going to continue on right now. Mr. Villemure, je comprends que vous avez un avis.
I understand that you have a notice of motion. Mr. Villemure, you have the floor. Thank you. I will table a motion, and it has been circulated in both official languages. Everyone should have a copy. I will read it now. That as part of its study on foreign interference, the committee invite Mr. Raphael Glucksmann to testify as chair of the Special Commission on Interference in the democratic processes of the European Union, including disinformation. That the committee allocate a minimum of 1 hour to hear the said witness during one of the first 3 Friday morning meetings scheduled for the study, prioritizing first the meeting on March 24th and then the one on March 31st or April 17th. Thank you, Mr. Villemure. I want to state that Mr. Glucksmann is already on our list. I think that you're requesting the dates specifically for this witness. It might be difficult for March 24th.
As my purview as chair, make sure that we can look at March 31st or April 17th. Allez.
Au-delà de la date, c'est qu'il soit.
I want him for 1 hour on his own. It's very relevant to our study.
Mr. Villemure has put the motion on the floor. Is there any objection to this? I think we can have consensus on this. Mr. Green, or Mr. Fergus, go ahead.
Poor Mr. Green, he has way more hair than I do. The only objection I would have is just having a single person panel. I would, there is, Mr. Chair, I'd appreciate it if we allowed, I don't mind, and I think it's a good idea to have more discussion, but I think there are some other people similar to the witness that is being proposed by Mr. Villemure that could accompany that person on the panel. And I'd be happy to submit some names to you.
Okay, so we do have a motion. Do I see any, Mr. Green, I see your hand up.
Thank you very much. So I support the motion. I think subject matter expertise, the higher the subject matter expertise, the better. But if it is the case that there isn't consensus around the table to have the witness solely for 1 hour, what might help, because, respectfully, somebody who is limited with 2.5 rounds in this quick rapid fire kind of way. One of the things that might help, and maybe for consideration of committee, should we not have support, is that we allow that witness to stay between 2 panels so that we could continue questioning. So that's just another option that I just thought of here, but I'm willing to support the motion as is.
Mr. Fergus, go ahead.
Very quickly, Mr. Chair, will this be the last meeting on this issue?
I think we need to have that discussion as a committee. I'm going to leave a little time when we get back to that first meeting. I've spoken to all of you about where we go with this, given the circumstances at Proc. I thought today's meeting was extremely valuable. It sort of gave us a different perspective, but I think we need to have further discussion. So I would anticipate that we're going to have at least one more meeting on this particular issue, and then we need to have that discussion perhaps as early as the Tuesday when we get back as to which direction we want to go. So this will happen, well, it may not happen actually on the 24th. It may be difficult, so the 31st or the 17th are probably the two likely dates that this particular situation will occur, if this motion passes.
Is there a possibility that we could have this discussion at subcommittee, or to try to figure out what the frame is? Because if it's going to be one last meeting, if it were, we'd want to make sure, even if it's two panels, then, and I like your suggestion of having maybe perhaps an overlap, having this particular guest be an overlap, but if there's an opportunity to do to have a couple of more people put on, or if we're going to have 2 or 3 more meetings, I would just like to know.
So we do have a fairly robust witness list at this point that we can draw from. So it's not like we're sort of cherry picking witnesses here. We do have a list that we can pick from. So I think what we would want to do then is to, if we're going to agree on this or not, I would like to see this happen by March 31st, if possible. Mr. Villemure, would you be acceptable or amenable to having this witness appear on 2 panels for that day? Or do you want him, est-ce que vous voulez spécifique?
Do you want him specifically for 1 hour? I wouldn't want to slow the work of the committee, but there were 2 reports on this issue. So we might have many questions to ask him. And I want to be sure that we all have time to ask questions of this witness. It's not set in stone, but I want for everyone to be able to ask questions.
Nous avons, okay, just let me finish. Nous avons
We have a motion. I would prefer that we deal with this motion. If there's no consent, then perhaps we can move to a vote. Mr. Fergus.
We want to support this.
Okay.
I just want to know in what context. Is this in a context of 6 more meetings, or is this context of 1 or 2 more meetings? So that's where I'm just trying to make that judgment.
I actually agree with your position that we should have a subcommittee meeting on this. I'm going to propose that to the vice chairs, but I would suggest that this will likely be just one more meeting on this particular issue. Of course, subject to any discussion with the subcommittee. So, yeah.
With that understanding, then we're comfortable with this. We don't need to do a vote. But we're always depending on everybody to act in good faith.
Right. Okay. So just so that we're clear, are we in agreement then to go ahead, Mike?
One more meeting following that meeting, or one more meeting after today? Well, I just don't. I'm clear on
and that's the problem I'm having, because I can't commit to the 24th.
No, I appreciate that. But
so if we're going to have this, then we're going to have it on the 31st.
What was the initial sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
What was the initial motion? It prescribed 6. Okay.
Yes.
We're good, and we can take the other stuff to the broader discussion to a future meeting or a subcommittee.
The original motion, there were 6 meetings that were scheduled for the foreign interference study. Today was the start of that. So if you recall, the work plan was for every Friday for the next 5 now that we were going to deal with foreign interference. The 24th, I don't believe is possible to include that. So that would mean that we would likely, if we were to do this on the 31st, that we would likely have 2 more meetings on this, but I would subject that to any discussion that we have at subcommittee at this point. So that's the problem I'm running into.
I thought when we, after we had come up with I don't want to drag this out. And I'm really sorry.
No.
This is really a genuine question. I just thought that when we had talked about it, there was informal discussions where we had talked about, well, we don't want to duplicate the efforts of other committees, so chances are it's not going to run out the whole 6.
It may not. So, and this is where this discussion has to happen at subcommittee, and that's the direction that I would want to go with this. We may, I'm not even sure at this point, again, it is subject to subcommittee, we may in fact take the 24th meeting and have that on a different subject if we're not able to have it. I don't know at this point. So, Mr. Villemure.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two things to raise. We had asked for and received 6 meetings. We had agreed to not duplicate efforts, and up till now, I don't think we have. And with Mr. Gluckman, I don't think we will be duplicating efforts. It's hard to say if there will be 1 or 2 or 3 more meetings. I respect this idea of not duplicating efforts, but there's a different angle from PROC that we can bring, and I want to bring this different angle. We can talk about it in subcommittee. I would ask for us to vote on it.
OK. La motion est en avant de nous.
The motion is before us. It is receivable. It's clear for me as the chair that we do not have unanimous consent, so I will propose that we vote.
A vote on the motion that was presented. And I'll remind committee as well that this witness is scheduled to appear. He is on the list. It's just the 1 hour and very specific dates is what clarifies this or directs this. So if you can go with the vote, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the vote is on the motion moved by Mr. Villemure. Do I need to repeat the text? No? Mr. Baines?
I abstain.
You abstain? Thank you. Monsieur Fergus?
Je m'abstiens.
Ms. Hepner? Mr. Lewis?
Support. Yeah.
Sorry, can you say that again? I couldn't hear.
For the motion.
For the motion, thank you. Madame Martinez-Ferrada. Pour. Mr. Barrett.
In favor. I didn't see Tim was here. Hi, Tim.
Mr. Waugh.
In favor.
Mr. Carrick.
Support.
Monsieur Villemure. Mr. Green.
In favor.
8 yeas, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So the motion does carry. I am going to take the advice of Mr. Fergus. I'm going to call a subcommittee meeting so that we can discuss this further. Leave it at my discretion to work with the clerk on to when this particular witness is going to come, and we will accommodate the motion that has just passed. That's it. Have a great break week. Enjoy time with your family, everyone. Thank you to the analysts. Thank you to the clerk and all the technicians in the room. And I especially want to thank my wife, who's here today, who has been here this week, looking after me with my bad back. So thank you. Meeting's adjourned.